Welcome to the D6 Family Ministry Podcast, a place where ideas, principles, and personalities come together to give you a ministry advantage that empowers the church and home.
I don't know anything more important in our society or in the kingdom of God than to help the church, help the family.
Discipleship is not an event, it's a way of life.
And one day it just hit me that discipleship at home was not about doing more. It was about inviting Christ into what we were already doing.
The goal of family ministry is not families sitting on the couch holding hands and singing Kumbaya. The ultimate goal is families that love God, love people, and make disciples of all peoples.
So that's why you're here. You're here to say 1 hour a week, as significant and as awesome as it is, we know that it's not enough and we want to be intentional with every hour.
You're listening to the D6 Podcast. Here are your hosts, Marianne Howard, Ron Hunter, and Josh Wooten.
Well, fellas, we are back and we have an amazing interview today by Kelly Minter. And she really leverages living on mission and is very, very practical in thinking about that and just thinking about the ministry of availability. We've talked about that on a previous podcast. And so I'm excited about our conversation today. But before we dive in, I wanted to ask you, what were some of the things that you and your wife did as parents to be that house that all the kids came to? What were the magnet things in your house that drove kids for you to be that house of influence? What are some things that you guys did?
I will say that we stocked our pantry with good snacks.
Yes.
I mean, we learned what our kids liked, what they thought was pretty cool. And when you heard their friends run to the pantry and say, hey, I wonder if we still have any, we knew what we needed to buy, make sure it's always in there. We also placed our gaming systems in the living room or the family room so that as they interacted with whatever their activities were, it was not in their bedrooms. Mm-hmm. And we always wanted the common space to be where they gathered and where we could pop our heads in and say, hey, do you need a refill or whatever? But it's our polite way of interacting and poking our heads in.
Mm.
Yeah, for us, the big benefit was having the people's mom, aka Lena, being at our house. She is a magnet. But also, I think, Ron, you're totally right. Food is everything for teenagers and lots of it. But we tried to do some fun things. They knew if they had sleepovers that when I was into video editing a lot more than I am now, we would make music videos with the kids. And it's, linear video editing was very easy for me. And we could spend an hour changing some outfits and running them, lip syncing through a song of the day. And then I would have it up on YouTube by the next morning. And they were just, loving it, sharing it with their family and friends. And so there's a treasure trove of old school Party in the USA and Justin Bieber hits. And a deep dive on YouTube. I will not tell you what the username is, but yeah, we did music videos.
That's so fun. Well, I currently have two teenagers, 13 and 17, and we invested in a ping pong table that is in our upper game room, and it's never leaving this house. I'm just going to tell you, when we move out of this house, the ping pong table will stay there forever because getting that thing up there was a beast. But it's a magnet and we leave it set up. And when the boys bring their friends over for lunch, like Xander brings the whole track team. Yes, we have everything stocked. They run up there and play.
Yeah.
And I love that.
So who's the best ping pong player in your house?
100% Chad Allen Howard. You guys, he is incredible. He's a good ping pong player. He is a good ping pong player. But you never know how God wants to use your home for ministry opportunities. And so I just want to encourage you to listen to this interview and just listen to Kelly's suggestions and perspective on how to live in the harvest field day by day. And we'll talk on the other side of this interview.
Are you concerned about your church's future? Will it serve another generation? The Bible says He is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and yet we often only know how to connect to Abraham. Let D6 help you connect with each generation. Your kids and grandkids are counting on you. D6 comes from the principles of Deuteronomy 6 and helps what happens in church also happen at home. Curriculum you can trust. Discipleship that connects.
We are live from the D6 conference in Orlando, Florida, and I am joined today by Miss Kelly Minter. Kelly is an author, speaker, and songwriter. Her most recent Bible study is a Bible study on Ruth, and she has The Blessed Life, which is a 90-day devotional book. Kelly works closely with Justice and Mercy International in Brazil and Moldova. She's the creator of the Cultivate event, which is centered around scripture, worship, prayer, and the mission work of JMI. She is also the host of the Cultivate Weekly podcast. Kelly, I've been looking forward to this conversation today. Thanks for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. This is awesome.
Well, one of the words that has been particularly close to my heart that the Lord has really been working in me for the last several years is the word perspective. I think God's word changes our perspective on a lot of things. Our perspective really matters in any kind of circumstance that we might face in our lives. But every life situation has a different perspective, and we can approach things from a different way, which then gleans scripture into that from a different perspective, right?
Yes.
So how can you talk a little bit about the perspective of a believer in the society that we find ourselves in today? What perspective should we approach our society with?
Well, obviously the broad answer is that we want a biblical perspective, okay? But on a specifically speaking, for me, I was just saying to a friend the other day, I said, I feel like I am not living in the world that I was living in even a decade ago. I'm definitely not living in the same world that I was living in 20, 30 years ago. But even within the last few years, I would say even since the pandemic, we are living in a different world. The social issues are more fractured and divisive than they've ever been. Moral issues are much more divergent than they've been, in the sense that you have people that really want to live according to, hey, our own terms, our own truth, and then you have what Scripture says that says, well, actually, Jesus is the way, He's the truth, and He's the life. So there's a very specific way to live. So we have all of this division, differing ideas, cultural clashes. There's a lot of unsteadiness. In fact, just at the timing of this podcast, a horrifying school shooting right just about 2 miles from my house at a lovely Christian school there. So here we have all of this stuff, right? So we can, when you talk about perspective, we can think despair. We can think, is God really on His throne? We can think, man, do we just cave to culture? Is that the way that we should go, or what do we do? But when we get into Scripture, we realize that, oh, okay, this is not the end for us. Jesus says over and over and over again, like, hey, we are living for eternity. This is not the final place. And He talks about storing up our treasure in heaven, not here. And so perspective of, hey, if I'm living for right now in this world and kind of the American dream come true, I'm in a really sad place right now. I'm in a fearful place right now because that American dream seems like it's, dissolving by the moment. If I am living to talk about and live the kingdom of God that Jesus has brought to this earth, not in full yet, but, then I see our time as an opportunity to speak truth, to love people, to show humility, and to also, I pray, be a beacon of light in a really, really dark place. So perspective means everything for us. And I think for me, and I'll just be honest, that I think and I'm sure it's this way to a certain degree, but it was sort of like the American dream and Jesus. Well, as the American dream, whatever that means for you, as that seems to fizzle day by day, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, you know what? I don't know that the American dream was ever really supposed to be part of my grand goal here. It's to live as a follower of Christ. And that's not to put our roots deeply here. It doesn't mean that we don't care about what's here. In fact, we'll actually care more about every moment of our lives here when we have an eternal perspective. But it's going to be from a different vantage point.
How does that change our relationships?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, again, when we think about what's eternal, so Jesus says, storing up that treasure in heaven. What is eternal? People are eternal. So that means that people are not disposable. People, every single person is made in the image of God. Every single person, whether they have our ideology, whether they have our belief, and so then we're to love, we're to reach out, we're to train, we're to speak the truth, and we're to talk about the gospel. And that means our relationships, in a sense, they become even more important than they were before because we realize that these are eternal. So when we spend time with people and when we spend time investing, we are literally storing up treasure in heaven because that is an eternal investment.
I know that you talk a lot about living missionally, like in your everyday life. How can we measure, like, what is there a measuring stick where we can tell whether we're living on mission or not?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, instead of thinking about like, okay, here's the measurement, I did these things that were missional today, I would say it's more of a posture of heart, that it really is, it should be how we posture ourselves. So, when I am, like the other day, I had a repairman come to the house and we're in the basement talking about my broken HVAC system and how the Freon is leaking out. And I'm like literally bleeding money as the Freon is bleeding out of the thing. And then he happens to mention that he lost his wife of 27 years to cancer in 2020. Well, that's a moment of, I'm not thinking like, okay, what's my missional checkbox today? I'm thinking posture. Did I wake up that morning thinking about, Lord, I want to serve and I want to be available? So in that moment, I think, okay, you know what? This is not really so much about my HVAC at the moment. Now this has taken a turn, and now there's an invitation for me to join him in this moment of what he shared with me, and I don't know what that's going to lead to, but where I can say, I'm so sorry that you lost your wife, and what a blessing that you took time with her, and just taking time with people. I think I'm a big proponent of, if you can, doing overseas mission, not for that even as the end goal, but because it opens our eyes to the mission here. One of the things that I get to do a lot with Justice and Mercy International is when we're in the Amazon doing home visits, where you're literally walking into these huts and you don't know what you're going to find. You're going to find alcoholics, you're going to find fractured marriages, you're going to find a child with special needs and this is, I've walked in on this, just, sitting in her own urine, where you're just like, oh my goodness, this is not how things should be, but there is not another option. And you just don't know what you're going to find in those home visits. And they used to be very awkward for me, but after doing them, praying for people, just serving them, dropping off food, seeing how you can help, giving the gospel, all of a sudden, that made me super comfortable with the awkward situations in my own neighborhood. That now, if I'm in someone's house and they've got a struggling child or a situation where I can just say, hey, can I pray for you? I would love to just pray for you, whether they're a believer or not. And so sometimes getting overseas just gives us, speaking of perspective, a different perspective. And then it opens our eyes to like, oh, well, hey, if I was able to do that there, why can't I do that here? And the answer is, well, you can do it here. Yeah. It's just always easier to take care of someone else's poor, I think, than it is sometimes to take care of our own. And so, again, just that posture of heart, I think we're to be living in the harvest field day by day. There's a child that comes from the street that comes over to my house often, and she knocks, and I know her knock, and she knocks often. And it's one of those things where it's like, there's that thing in my head, like, well, set boundaries and just don't answer, whatever. And then I'm like, no, what would he want? And that doesn't mean that I can answer the door every single time, but it's like, what's the posture of my heart? Like, I want to be an open door and I want to be available, so.
Exactly. Well, this is a great conversation. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Imagine families in your church thriving in their faith, blossoming with engagement, kids who are curious and excited, parents who are inspired, and the unmistakable sound of joyous discipleship echoing through your halls. Yes, it's possible. Even in today's whirlwind of schedules and screens, your church can be a haven of family faith. But let's face it, reaching families today is tough. The changing landscape, the distractions, the packed calendars. That's exactly why there's D6 Home Point, a beacon of support for churches striving to strengthen family discipleship. Our strategic model is crafted to meet the needs of churches just like yours, all across the country. Join the hundreds of churches that have witnessed the beautiful transformation of families and the blooming of ministries with our proven approach. Our resources are as diverse as your congregation. From on-campus programs to dynamic online tools, we provide a treasure trove of customizable materials that blend seamlessly into the fabric of your unique church community. Don't let this opportunity pass your church by. To find out how D6 Home Point can revitalize family discipleship in your community, visit d6homepoint.com.
We're having a conversation with Kelly Minter. Kelly, you're talking about the girl in your neighborhood. I know her knock. Like, I am listening to the door right now and can hear my neighbor's knock on my door saying, "Can Beckham come out and play?" Right?
Yes,
like,
yes, we know the knock, and we're blessed that they're knocking.
Well,
that's the thing.
They're literally knocking on your door.
Yeah.
These kids are the opportunity, and just changes your perspective to say, can I love on this kid?
Absolutely.
Can this kid walk in my house and know that they are loved by both me and Jesus? And man, what a cool opportunity. That is awesome. However, going back to even the opportunities that you've had in the jungle and how that changes your perspective, how can pastors and church leaders encourage their members, their congregations to, I don't know, maybe challenge their own perspective? So presenting opportunities like, hey, let's go on this mission trip, or what are other things that church leaders can do to really, from the pulpit, challenge their congregation to change their perspective, to have an eternal perspective? Yeah.
Well, service is such a big thing. I mean, serving is such a big deal. And I think just giving opportunity for people to serve and then inviting them to those opportunities. I was sharing one of the sessions here that, I've got my nieces and nephews, right now they're so enamored with everything that the world has to offer. And I get it, because I was that way. I wanted just to taste everything that this world, not everything, but there was a lot that I wanted to taste that this world had to offer. And what shifted it for me wasn't the message of, the world system is not all it's cracked up to be, or the world system will not be fulfilling, or don't love the world because you're supposed to love God. And those were good truths, and I'm glad I heard those truths. But what changed it was when something replaced the world system for me. And I would say that when you begin to experience the kingdom of God, that becomes such a superior experience that then all of a sudden you realize, the world is very flimsy and very thin in comparison with those experiences. So it's like, how do we give our kids experiences? Well, for me, growing up in the church, it was going to Bible study with my dad and sitting in the adult Bible study. And yes, was I there for the brownies? 100% I was afterwards. But I listened to all of that. I heard all of that. Going on a mission trip when I was in high school that my mom took me, and seeing the people of Milan, where at the time, you had like a 3% evangelical, ratio or percentage, going to the Amazon jungle, seeing how people in the jungle lived. But then even in my own community, service projects, Bible studies, youth group activities, those experiences where you begin to taste the fellowship of Christ with one another, with Christ himself, and you begin to realize, like, okay, this is actually what I want, and I want this even more than all those other things, because those other things are actually detractors from this real life. But we have to give that generation experience of the real life. We can't just talk about it.
Right, but it seems like there is also a balance of, like, I have a list of people in my brain where I'm like, I think they want to live on mission, but are they ready for that? Is there a balance of, like, these people are ready for this type of experience in that mission, and these people, they at least are rooted and grounded and can have a different kind? Or do you think there's an opportunity for both? Is there a balance there?
Yeah. Well, I just think, not everybody is going to be, I just finished an Elizabeth Elliot biography, and she lived in the jungle. I didn't just read this and I'm like, okay, I've been to the jungle a bunch of times, but I'm living in the middle of the jungle like she has, so there's specific callings for certain things, but everybody is to be part of their, of mission. And I'll just define that as mission that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to China or you're going to Africa or even a mission trip. It's really maybe a simpler word is service. Just how are we serving others? I think we're such a consumer, me culture. And if we really believe that Jesus says that seed falls into the ground, has to die before it can grow. If we really believe that, then we've got to die to some of our own selfish ambition or our selfish ambition and get outside of ourselves and do some simple service things. So not everybody's going to be ready for the extreme, but everybody needs to be doing something and, sharing the good news of the gospel as well. And I think that's so significant. And I write about it in the 90-day devotional of the blessed life, but it's like Jesus teaches in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, but then he comes down that mountain and then he shows the disciples what that message looks like in real life. And that's when he begins to heal people and begins to tangibly meet the needs of the people around him. So it's not just enough for us to tell our kids. We need to. I'm a teacher. That's what I love. I'm a Bible teacher. I love teaching the Bible. But we have to give them practical opportunities. And if we're not about that, then how are they going to be about it?
Right. Let's talk to those parents, though. I mean, how can the parents who are listening help their kids approach relationships with intentionality for the sake of the gospel? Like, how can we help our kids live on mission?
Yeah, I think it's just involving them. It's taking them along. If maybe there's someone in the hospital that you're called to minister to, and if it's age appropriate, bring your child. Get them used to being around uncomfortable situations. Show them what it looks like to pray over someone in a situation like that. Bringing them to help serve at church, help them set up, or have them help you set stuff up. Getting the coffee ready. The kids love to serve like that. If there is a mission trip opportunity, maybe it's just even a local thing that in your church where you're taking people, for a weekend, and bring your kids. So I think any kind of service opportunity, I think is really important.
I know you have written a lot of Bible studies and a lot of things for people to be able to consume and dig deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us about The Blessed Life. Tell us about that 90-day devotional book that you've just put out.
Yeah, so that one is a little different. Pretty much all the rest are actually Bible studies.
Mm-hmm.
This is, just that daily devotional. It's really easily accessible, and it takes you 90 days through Jesus' Sermon on the Mount and then 10 miracles that Matthew really curated for us. And so after those 90 days, you get all the way from through Matthew chapter 5 all the way through chapter 9. So
awesome.
I'm really excited about it.
That's so cool. Well, Kelly, thank you so much for being here today. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with us.
Yeah, so happy to.
For parents and church leaders, we want to live on mission, and it's not for ourselves. It's for the glory of the Lord, so that others can see and follow. But I love the idea of taking your kids along, letting them see you live on mission, being that example. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Picking up the theme of our kids, inviting kids over, that was always a ministry that my wife had. She became that mom to so many, and we've continued to maintain relationships with several of the young people. Our kids are 29 and 30 years old, and 12 years after they've left high school, we still interact with the friends that hung out at our house. We still have good relationships with them, and I that's one of those areas where moms and dads just see it, like Kelly said, a mission field.
Yeah.
See it as a place to lean in and be that godly parent that those kids may or may not have. And if they do, if they are friends from church and they do have they have parents who are involved in church, you get to teach them elements that, are uniquely you, but maybe they don't have any godly influence. So what's the percentage you guys had along the way of non-Christian homes coming to your home, meaning they came from a home where parents had no interest in God versus these were kids who, hey, their parents were in church all the time? What was the percentage for you guys being in your homes?
Well, for our kids, it varied. Growing up, our kids went to Christian schools, so it was the vast majority. We were both working in, Lena worked at a Christian company, I worked at a church, and that was it. But I tell you where the shift happened is when we started bringing kids home, their friends home from college, because they both went to college here locally, and we were the home cooked meal. We were the home base
Yeah.
for the college students, and that turned into the minority, did not
Wow.
have any affiliation in many
Wow.
cases, and it was a game changer for us. And still to this day, we're leaning in with that group of kids and going,
Yeah.
okay, I have to earn the right to share the gospel with this bunch. But it starts with, maybe taco night on a
Mhm.
Tuesday and
Yeah.
loving them where they are and letting my life be the sermon that they hear that day.
That's right.
Mm.
That's right. The majority of the kids that my kids bring home are not churched. And I'm noticing, we're seeing them so much more because they come from different situations. Some come from divorced families. And so coming to be a part of a stable, oh, this is what you do, this is how you guys live. I think there's a draw to that. But I've also really tried to tell the boys, guys, this isn't stocking the pantry and the financial investment. Because let me tell you, teenage boys who run track,
They can put away some
fellas,
groceries.
it hits the budget hard, but it's
Yeah.
worth that. It is worth the financial investment because the financial investment of having Pocky Sticks, strawberry Pocky Sticks, and Pop Tarts in the pantry, and here's the Prime hydration drink. Having those things in my home really does say we care about you, and it also says, hey, we want to have an opportunity to care for you, but we also want to have an opportunity to speak the gospel into you. And so, what an awesome opportunity. The other thing that I love that she talked about was she talked about these specific seasons and how you can utilize those seasons. And, she talked about the empty nester and the single and the young adult and the widow. And oftentimes, when you're living in that season, you can really believe the lie from the enemy that you don't have a role or there's not a purpose for you, or I don't know what that lie is, but I know there's one there. And I love that she really empowered those seasons that you have an opportunity to be a beacon of light, and you have an opportunity. She's ministering to her nieces and nephews, and she really feels like that's a calling for her. And that's also generational discipleship. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're in that season of empty nester, or you're a widow or a widower, or you're single, you have the ministry of availability. God wants to use your flexibility and your freedom and in the margin of time in profound gospel-centered ways. And I really like that she brought that to light.
Yeah, I would argue that if you're a parent and you've got kids coming over, you don't need to prep a lesson, you need to prep a sentence.
Yeah.
It's only the sentences that are making the powerful impact on your friends' kids. No preparation needed. Just lean in, give them encouragement, give them a little bit of counsel or a little bit of advice, maybe tell a personal story, but just build
Give
them
them
up.
food.
Feed them and build them up. Feed them and build them up. That's all you got to do. So, yeah,
that's really good, Ron.
Yeah. Well, talking about building people up, next week we've got Ken Brady. And Ken, man, talk about a coach. You know, you talked about track and field. This guy is like the guru coach for small groups. He's lived it. He's lived it as a pastor, building various styles of church, and he's also lived it being a life group, small group leader. And he and his wife Tammy do an amazing job here in the Nashville area. And he's going to come alongside of us and give us just some real interesting perspectives on small groups. And so if you lead or you're part of, maybe you're not the leader, this is going to give you a way to become much more healthy small group. And we look forward to seeing you next week at the D6 podcast.
You've been listening to the D6 podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com.